Now that you have a basic understanding of the core system of intonation in American English, let's take a look at the 3 different types of intonation more in depth, starting with structural intonation. Structural intonation is like a base layer. It's the lowest layer of intonation. It's very structural in the sense that it's tied to the grammar or the sentence structure. The simplest form of this would be, for example, statements, I like dogs, or yes or no questions, do you like dogs? But also things like lists or even the boundary between thought groups. In the introduction, we talked about how there's sort of a higher level and a lower level, and how this works differently through the different types of intonation. For structural intonation, we have that same basic framework. There's high, medium, and low. But in terms of structural intonation specifically, this would be a rise in the intonation, a fall in the intonation, or a flat intonation. Now, the middle flat tone is not common. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the structural intonation section. But there's, in addition to that, 2 combinations where we can use fall rise or we can use rise fall, and this gives us more possible effects and things that we can play with based on the context. Let's first dive into uses of falling intonation. The first use of sentence final falling intonation is, of course, with regular statements, whether they are positive or negative. It doesn't matter. The use of falling intonation simply tells the listener that the statement is complete. And it tends to fall off the cliff at the very end. So on that very last syllable, stressed or not, we will tend to have a very sharp final fall. Some examples of this are, I like dogs. I want to go to the beach. I see a man. Now, one very important thing to note here, and this will apply to all sentences, all thoughts, but we need to address this here in regular statements, is that sentence final intonation does not necessarily mean it happens on the exact last word. Now, by default, meaning normally with no special context, the focus word, so the attentional intonation, this is tied in here when we're talking about this detail. Whatever the focus word is, by default, it's the last content word. Okay, now there might be a function word after it, like if you say instead of I like dogs, you might say I like it. From there, we don't want to fall from it because it is already unstressed. We're already falling from like, so it's actually going to be on like. So in that case, it's obviously not the exact last word. But what if the last word is a content word, like dogs, and I shift the focus word? So maybe I want to clarify and I say, I like dogs, because you think I don't like dogs. Okay, now normally, I like dogs. I like dogs. So dogs gets that little extra rise, and then we fall at the very end, feels complete. But if I shift the focus word to like, using attentional intonation, now the structural falling intonation falls starting from like instead of from dogs. Now, dogs is still stressed, and we're going to talk more about that when we talk about attentional intonation. But likes is now the highest, and we're going to generally have this falling tone to the end. Now, I could do, for example, I as the focus word. I like dogs. Notice like and dogs are still stressed, but it's I like dogs. We have this general falling tone because now the focus word is the first word. So a couple more examples of that. Instead of I want to go to the beach, I can say I want to go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. Or instead of I see a man, we say I see a man. I see a man. So keep all of that basic information in mind as we look at additional uses of falling as well as later rising intonation. The next case where we use sentence final falling intonation is with commands. So you can think of a command sort of like a statement that comes from a king, right? Someone that is a higher point of authority, and they're able to direct the statement onto you, down onto you. Okay, this is important to think about this. Because if someone is lower than you, they don't have the power to command you. They don't have the power to order you. Would you tell your mom, hey, clean the kitchen? Or, hey, go to work? Probably not. Now, what does that mean? Don't think of that in terms of the high tone or the low tone, okay? Think about this. A command is sort of like a statement that is an order, right? It's directly to you. I'm telling you to do something, so there's a specific purpose. It's not just a general statement, right? But it's firm, it's direct, and it's often serious. So then what kind of sentence final intonation do we want to use if we're giving a command to somebody? Falling. Remember the engine or the system at the core of the intonation. Solidity, firmness, completion, the ground. So if I firmly and directly say, do this, run, clean your room, do the dishes. Now there are ways that you can make it sound lighter. There's ways that you can play with the intonation that we're going to talk about later. But this is the basic idea, right? It needs to feel firm and solid. So we use a falling tone at the end. Now, as we'll see later, you can use a fall rise to give a command with an implied warning. We'll talk about how that works later. Let's now talk about WH questions. Don't worry, we're going to talk about yes or no questions when we talk about rising intonation. This is all about falling intonation. Now, what I'm going to tell you about WH questions, maybe you've heard somebody explain it this way before, maybe not, but I want you to completely change the way that you think about WH questions. There's a specific purpose of a WH question, and it actually explains why we use falling intonation instead of rising intonation. A WH question is fill in the blank. It is a statement with missing information. A yes or no question is not a statement. It's a pure question. Yes, no, true, false, positive, negative, exist, does not exist. It's very binary, okay? We're trying to find the truth of something. But a WH question is fundamentally different. So if I say, Tom likes dogs, Tom likes dogs. What if I don't know who likes dogs? I say, who likes dogs? Who likes dogs? I already know that someone likes dogs. That's true. There's already a yes, so it's not a yes or no question. Someone likes dogs. I just don't know what piece of information, what name or what person completes that statement to say, Tom likes dogs. So where a yes or no question rises because we don't know the truth of something, a WH question is already on solid ground. It's just missing a piece of information in the statement. Now there's also the element of certainty versus uncertainty, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later and how that works. But in terms of the difference between a yes or no question and a WH question, the yes or no question is inherently uncertain. You don't know if it's true or false, if it's yes or no. Where a WH question, sure, you still don't know. You're uncertain who likes dogs or where the party is or whatever it is that you don't know about, right? But it's already certain that there is an answer, that there's a piece of information that fills the blank. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Where a yes or no question, you don't know if there's anything that would fill a blank. So you need to first establish, right? Do you like dogs? Yes, no. You say yes. Okay, I say, what kind of dogs do you like? So now we fall at the end because the first yes or no question we rise, we're uncertain, we don't know. You say yes. Okay, now I know that you like dogs. I don't know what kind of dogs. So there's a blank there. It's a statement. If you say, I like big dogs, okay, that would be the statement. That's the kind of dogs you like. I don't know that. So I say, what kind of dogs do you like? And I fall because I already know for certain that you do like some kind of dog. I just don't know what specifically. So the WH question is just a placeholder for that missing information. It doesn't affect the fundamental intonation for a statement. Now note that there is a use for rising at the end of a WH question, and we're going to talk about that and why it makes perfect sense based on the core engine, but a little bit later. The fourth use of falling intonation at the end is for tag questions that comment. There's actually two different ways that we can use the intonation on a tag question. One is to rise, one is to fall. Now, if you rise on the tag question, which we'll talk about a little later, that's a true question. So I give you a statement and then question it. You're a student, aren't you? So I want you to confirm, I want a response, so I throw it up to you and I want you to give me the answer. But what if I'm just commenting? Like, I know you're a student, I'm not actually asking you. I say, you're a student, aren't you? Now, maybe I'm wrong. Could be that I'm wrong. And you say, oh no, I'm actually not a student. But when I fall at the end, now it feels more complete. It can feel more certain. I'm not passing the ball to you. And so we end up with the effect of it just being a comment. So it's more of a comment tag that looks like a question instead of a question tag. And I know, why would we have this at all, right? If it's a tag question, shouldn't it always be an actual question? And yeah, but this is something that languages do. And we know English is complicated, so it exists and you need to know about it. But regardless, it should make sense based on the core system of why we get that effect when we fall.